Hello and welcome to the Time to Calibrate podcast. This is episode 43 and I am Brent Robiar. Joining me today, as is often the case, is my co-host, Mark Levesque. Unfortunately, Bob could not be here this morning, but in his place today, we have a special guest from one of my favorite YouTube channels, This Watch, That Watch. Welcome, Michael Steen Holst, aka Mike. How are you this morning, evening for you?
I am good. It's like you said, evening, but I am great today. I'm happy to be here with you guys.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you on this morning as well. You know, Mike, we like to begin with a wrist check, and as you are our guest, you get first honors. So, what is on your wrist today?
So that's embarrassing. I don't have one, but I will get one. Do you get to choose?
No worries. This is not the first time that has occurred on this podcast.
So, do you want the Apple Watch?
No.
No. Okay. Fair enough.
You're fired if you wear the Apple Watch.
Then we can do the G-Shock.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah,
that's better.
Or we can do, which is out of the vault, the Zenith A384 Revival Edition.
Yeah, that's really cool too.
Watch.
That's fantastic.
That's my daily wear at the moment. I bought it a year and a half ago, give or take. I think I'll put that one on. I think that's the one we're going for.
There you go.
Put the Apple Watch far away so as not to hurt anybody.
Yeah, it should just burst into flames the minute you put it on camera.
Mark, what do you got on this morning?
First, I want to apologize to our fans or our listeners. Last episode, that is, I used my wife's headset, which is a Plantronics headset that she has for work, which is a high-end headset. I figured I'd try it out to see how the quality would be. And unfortunately, my voice didn't sound very good. But it did eliminate a lot of the noise cancellation stuff around me. So it was amazing to edit with, but it just didn't sound very good. So I'm back to my regular setup. But I have a cold this week, so if my voice does sound funny, it's because of that. It has nothing to do with the equipment. So what I'm wearing on wrist today, I'm wearing the Christopher Ford Lumiere dive watch that was on loan for review. It's probably my last day with it, so it's got to go back to our friends at Christopher Ward. We have a review on the calibrated wrist that I wrote and Bob took pictures of. And Bob was also generous with his time and did a little video on YouTube on his channel for it too as well. So I'm really enjoying it. It's fun. It'll be sad to see it go, but can't keep them all. Or you can try, but you
just arrived here. This arrived just the other day. It's the Doxa 300T. It's the professional. I really, really like this watch. I have been waiting a number of years. I don't know why it is that I never got a chance to actually get it on wrist, but I'm really enjoying it. And so I thought I would sport it here today.
Very cool.
So for those out there who may be unfamiliar, Mike is the voice behind This Watch, That Watch, a YouTube channel that trades hype cycles for honest conversations about watches and the people who love them. Rather than chasing trends, Mike is interested in the why behind the wrist. And that draws us to certain brands, designs, stories, and how the watch industry functions for good and also for bad. Though through his relaxed and thoughtful approach to watches and the YouTube medium, he's helped carve out a space for slower and more human conversations in modern watch media. So, Mike, we don't like to surprise our guests here per se, but we always do a little digging. So if you don't mind, I would actually like to start outside the watch sphere for a moment, because you do have a day job. And you even have another YouTube channel that, while similar in tone and approach, varies greatly from the one you produce with This Watch, That Watch. And you tell us a little bit about your background, your consulting career, your work, and maybe Watch Unusual?
Yeah, so my background is business, a lot of it in HR, but also in consulting. I've been basically a slave to employment for 25 years, much like many of us. Worked in multinational companies, including pharmaceuticals. My first employment was a company called Novo Nordisk, which everybody knows these days because they do the whole Ozempic thing. But 15, 20 years ago, nobody in the US knew it unless you were actually a diabetic. And then I've been basically everywhere, software, tech, consulting, and currently I'm in fast-moving consumer goods and doing an HR thing. So I'm responsible for an HR department and advising basically our managing director or CEO on HR related topics. That's kind of my claim to fame in the day-to-day. It's exciting enough, but it gets boring on occasion. So that's why I kind of ended up saying, what else should I do? And, at my age, either men buy a bicycle and start doing triathlon and stuff like that, or I said, how about starting a YouTube channel? That sounds equally stupid. And that's what I did. And so that's kind of how I ended up in this.
Well, we're glad that that's the choice you made. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So was there a particular watch or moment that cemented your passion for horology?
Not as such. I've spoken about it before because I think I've always had watches, and my dad, when I lived in South Africa many many years back as a child, came to Denmark much later, and I remember my dad coming back from Japan because he had a manufacturing company and he got stuff from Japan, and he came back with a calculator watch, Seiko, obviously like mid-80s, something like that. And I remember owning that, and then I got onto a Casio, and then I think the first mechanical watch I actually had was a Seiko Arcturus, which had a rubber strap. But it was around 2001, 2002, 2003 where I suddenly realized that I owned a Breitling and I owned an IWC and I owned a Tag Heuer. And I just kind of knew what was inside of them. And it was like, and then somebody says like, but you're a watch nerd. And it's like, no, I just have like 3 different watches. And then it's like, no. And then what about, and well, that's mechanical, that's automatic, and this is manual wind, and this is quartz. And it's like, no, you're a watch nerd. And then, as funds started flowing into my bank account as I got a full-time job and I started walking around other people who had watches, you start talking to people, and then sort of grew. And, initially it was mainly a name brand thing. Fell in love with Rolex and Breitling and those kind of brands and IWC. And then over time, you start learning more and more and more and more. And then you eventually, everybody who knew me and also my family were like, yeah, you've got a problem. And I've basically had it ever since. I've gone through all the phases of, spending way too much money, buying too much cheap stuff, and then also buying too much expensive stuff and offloading and not knowing what you're trying to find your way and trying to find your own passion in the thing. So that's the thing. But the 3 watches, I was like, yeah, you're a watch nerd. Just like, yeah, true, possibly true.
That's good.
I hinted about this in my last question, but your approach to both of your YouTube channels is very clinical. It's very calm, and you are a consummate communicator. In terms of this watch, that watch, is that a conscious effort to kind of counterbalance the hype that's out there, or is it just the way you are?
Well, it is the way I am. This is how I think, and this is how I sort of approach things. But when I started the YouTube channel, I said to myself, I don't want to do what the others did. I want to contribute something new and different and meaningful. So I either want to be, when I bring up a topic, I either want to be able to add to the conversation or bring a different perspective to the conversation, and so, ideally an original approach to the conversation. And that's one of the things that keeps guiding me today. I think I've added a 4th principle, which is I would like to be copied. But that's kind of the approach I have. So whenever I have a topic or I see, a ranking video, or it's like, I'm not averse to doing a ranking video, but it's like, how can I put a spin on it that doesn't make it look like every other ranking video? And do I have something not correct, but reasonably meaningful or intelligent to say?
Yeah.
So people walk away. They don't have to agree with me. I say a lot of nonsense all the time. I'm well argued. I can sound more heavily opinionated, and I'm aware of that. But being able to say something and then say, this, I'm putting this out there, at least a reasoned argument, and I want people to think about it and say, okay, hey, this is the thing. And then I also just don't want hype. I don't want, BS opinions just for the sake of clickbait. I like thinking about things, and I like nuance, and that's in general how I am. So that does guide the way I do my YouTube channel as well.
Well, you certainly have achieved the first 3 pillars, and I hope actually that you achieve the 4th.
I seem to be noticing every now and again some YouTubers are doing things that they didn't do before, which I'm like, maybe that's me. I can't prove it, but it's like, yeah.
Well, it is refreshing, going from we had a guest last week who is all about entertainment in his watch reviews and in his content. And he definitely has his own personality and his own twist to what he does. And your brand of content is the polar opposite, both equally valid, both equally entertaining. And, there's space for all of that online, which is great. And believe me, Brent and I talk about your videos often, and we're big fans. We enjoy the full length For listeners, you just covered his face, but no, we really enjoy the form of the content, the quality, and the thoughtfulness behind the content. It's really cool, especially for us watch nerds who are
Mm.
deeply into this stuff. To get the analysis that you provide, it's fantastic. So you
Yeah.
cover both broad industry issues and specific watches. How do you balance market analysis versus hands-on reviews?
Well, initially, I basically only did market analysis, sort of broad topics, because I didn't have access. I have friends who have watches, but loaning their watches and stuff like that, it's just not really feasible, and not everybody wants to loan a watch, that kind of stuff. As my channel has grown, I've been quite aggressive with reaching out to brands. And initially, I've basically had no standards, in the sense that I've just written to anybody and said, would you like to allow me to borrow a watch or loan a watch? To also have that perspective on it. And I also very aggressively asked them, it's like, can I fly down and see your factory? Because I think it adds to my own passion, because I love the fact that I can get inside a building and see how they do the things. But I also learn something every single time. And then I'll just, ask questions and say, okay, how exactly you're doing this? Where are you getting this from? And this thing looks similar. And why do you do that? And what's the most important thing to you? And it makes for better content, but it also gives me a more nuanced understanding of what's going on in sort of the passion of the hobby, right? Um, so that's kind of why, and that's why I do both. I stick mainly with market analysis, because that is like my key claim to fame. I'm never going to be a pure play product reviewer. I also think it's hard to do well, but I'd like to improve on it. But it's never going to be the core of my content.
Okay. Yeah, when I was younger, my kids were younger, we used to watch How It's Made on the Discovery Channel. They do tours of factories and so forth. And
Yes.
at the time, I had a job in logistics and supply chain where I was on the road, and I did get to visit a lot of manufacturers. And every time I was asked, "Do you want to go visit the manufacturer? You want to go in the back and take a look?" And I would always jump out of the seat and let's
Yeah.
go. So I would love to do that with watches and go visit factories, and something that I'm actually passionate in. It would be
Yeah. Yeah.
fantastic. So maybe one of these days we'll get
No, but
invited somewhere.
it's just fascinating to have the opportunity and just see, okay, what are you guys doing? And this machine. And then I was at Brand a couple of months back. It's like, yeah, this used to be Rolex machines, but it's secondhand. We couldn't afford a new one, so we got old Rolex machines. We're using them. They work really well, but they need to be up and running, because it takes them like 3 hours, because they're so old. So they like
Yeah.
a lot. And it's like, you're sort of all the intrigues, and you're talking to the engineer, and he's like, yeah, well, I came from a place where they had all the newest machines. This is it's just fascinating. And it's like
Oh,
you
it
go
must
into
be.
the weeds of lubrication and stuff like that you never thought would be interesting, but it turns out to be that it actually is.
Yeah, for us, I'm sure. You ask my wife, I think she'd roll her eyes, but I think we love that kind of stuff. So you've made videos about overrated watches and the industry's biggest cliches. What
Mhm.
trends do you think are the most misunderstood by enthusiasts right now?
Oh, that's a difficult question. Um, I don't know if there's a misunderstood trend. I think I think there's a couple of things that sort of come to mind when you say misunderstood. I think there's a general sort of misunderstanding around pricing and quality, and sort of everything's getting more expensive, and some of it is just pure, we want to go for rich people and they have more money, and then there isn't a component to that. But there's sort of a understanding that everybody's doing this, and not everybody is. There are quite a few brands that are investing at improving features at the same time, not necessarily one to one, fair enough, but they are trying to do better things. And I think that's one misunderstanding. I think the other misunderstanding is, I don't know if it's a misunderstanding, but it's kind of the two camps, which is, if you've got the one side, which is the people that see this as jewelry and it's like it's an ornamentation, and the other people that is like a specs race. And I think both kind of, not correct either of them, because the specs race is like, you can't judge a watch based on specs. It's like, I will never buy a watch that's not COSC certified. It's like, why?
Mm,
Why? I understand why you need 40 miles per gallon in your car or whatever. That makes sense. I understand why you want 300 miles of range on your electric vehicle. That makes sense. But this is you can wind it, or you don't need it for any practical purpose. So why would that one practical thing be so incredibly important that you just simply cannot, do without it? It's like just plus minus 2 to 4 instead of minus 5 to 10. It's like, who cares? If it's a nice watch, it's a nice watch. So I think that's one of the misconceptions that I think.
Mike, I can't have a watch that's only 100 meters water resistant. If I fall overboard, it's got to be at least 2, maybe 300 meters water resistant.
It literally has to go to 50 atoms.
Exactly. Because if I sink, I'm a big guy. I may go deep.
Yeah. No, so I think that's the one. The other thing, you think, if you're going to talk about misunderstanding, I don't know if it's a misunderstanding, but trends, this is like everything else. The brands try to create trends, and they also try to jump on trends. So you see, like 2 years ago, everything was pink. It's like, I don't know why. And now this year, it seems like tiger's eye stone and stone dials is a big thing.
Stone dials, and the integrated sports watch. People are still coming out with new ones.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, well, and it's like, wow, why do they keep producing? Well, because you keep buying them.
Yeah, you mentioned before about the people who are into the specs race and people who are into the ornamentation. There are a lot more people into the ornamentation and buying a watch because it has a name or because it's a status, or than there are of the tech nerds like the rest, like some of us.
Yeah, agree.
I know you have more than 176,000 followers now on YouTube. And statistically speaking, only about 1% of YouTubers ever hit that 100K mark. And yet you achieved it in a relatively short period of time. So I'm wondering, like, when you started out, did you have any idea how much traction the channel would get so soon?
I had no baseline for comparison. None. I had no clue. I remember sitting there, and I think my first video that exploded was a video about, I think it was like you need to have a summer watch or something, or winter watch or something like that. And by exploded, it had like 15 views in an hour. Now I do 15 views in a minute. It's not even comparable. It's not even close. But I was like, my wife, I got 4 subscribers in a day. I was totally knocked back. I had no idea. I think it was only when I got to around, 15, 16,000 subscribers, and I have an Excel sheet looking at all other people so I can see how much they're growing. It's like, okay, for the last 5, 6, 7 months, nobody has had the percentage growth that I've had. I was like, okay, this is actually going quite well. And then I told my friends, and they made fun of me. It's like, you have a YouTube channel? Seriously? Aren't you a little bit old for that? It's like, and they were just, it's like, you don't tell that to your friends when you're drinking some beers. They're like, okay, we're going to make fun of you all night. This is, you're never going to live this down. You're going to be it's like, you're enough of a nerd already, and you decided to start a YouTube channel about watches. Seriously, dude. And then, but it was around 15,000. I was like, oh, this is actually going quite well. And then at 50,000, a brand actually reached out to me. It's like, do you want to see one of our watches? I was like, yes. So no, I didn't even do. I mean, I'm still doing it as a hobby, and I'm so hyper competitive. So I like the fact that it's growing, but I'm doing it as a hobby, and I don't really know what I expected. I just wanted to challenge myself about making videos, making good content, putting myself on the screen, and then talking about something I enjoy, and that's still the driving force behind this. And so far, it's continuing to grow, which is just fabulous. I love all the support I've gotten for the channel. That there's of the 8 billion people on the planet, there are at least 176,000 that an old person that just talks and talks and talks is actually a viable, I'm going to call it, business model, but apparently it is.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's well deserved, I'll tell you. So what surprised you the most about running a watch-related YouTube channel, apart from your friends making fun of you?
I think 2 things. One is how positive people really are, and maybe that's my channel, but in general, it's a very sort of appreciative community. It's not sort of super polarized. Yeah, sure, people will comment about Hublot, and there's a little bit of hate towards brands, Rolex, whatever. It's like waitlists, that kind of stuff. But generally, people are super, super positive and super, super appreciative of the work you put through, and people really want to contribute and make suggestions and suggest things I can improve upon and do. And I think that's a huge surprise, or not a surprise, but it's a positive. The other thing is it's hard work. It's fun, but but the pressure of every week having to come up with something new is I mean, it's tough. In the beginning, it was easy because I was like, I'd made a list, and then I was like, I've got 15, so I've got 15 weeks. But then suddenly you're in 14 weeks, like I have to come up with another 15. It's like so far it hasn't turned into repetition, but it's hard work, but it's a positive because it's still remaining challenging and fun and exciting, and it keeps me thinking and it keeps the brain engaged, and I enjoy that.
You do all your own editing?
Everything. I do it all myself. I film, I edit, the whole shebang. So that's a lot of fun. Everything's done in the home, which is also quite the exercise because I have to kick the family out typically. So I actually film in the bedroom because that's the only place we have space for, and that's where the chair is that I sit in. And I have to get the kids out so the noise in the background isn't there. And it's like basically it's Saturday because I can't do Monday to Friday, and it's like get out. You have to tell my wife I love you, but you need to find something to do with the kids for the next 7 hours.
7 hours. Holy cow.
Then I'll do 7 videos in a row. And
the only thing I think that your channel is missing is a little wee fireplace, because it just seems like that fireside chat vibe that's going on there. With the proliferation of all this contemporary watch media, do you think that the modern collector has become more informed, or do you just think that they're more opinionated?
I think the modern collector, there's fewer and fewer of them. I think in general, they're more informed. I think it's harder as a collector to have a brand pull one over on you in terms of what you're actually getting. It's actually a very transparent industry because of the sort of perspective there's on it and the views that are on it. So I think, yes, I think in general they're more informed. Having said that, I think there's also, I don't like the sort of definition of what's a collector and what's not a collector, but there are a lot of people that are enthusiastic, but they have different things they're informed about, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So not everybody is equally informed about the same things. And to my own example, I can't recite Rolex serial numbers, Rolex numbers. I can't do it. And I don't know which AP21147932.ST. I can't do that. And some people are just absolutely brilliant at that. And then, there's other people that are fantastic at knowing which one has a double balance or whatever, or a column wheel or not a column wheel. That's stuff that doesn't stick in my head, but it sticks in other people's heads. So again, they're niche competencies. But as a general, I think people are collectors, and also I think regular buyers, at least if they're moderately information seeking, have the opportunity to be much more informed than they ever have been. And I also think that's, just to speak on for that, I think that's one of the reasons why you see more and more watch companies reaching out to YouTubers, because they are seeing how they're not in control of the narrative, and they would very much like to. They've kept it at a distance and didn't take it seriously, and they're like, okay, you need to take this seriously because these people actually have opinions. They may be stupid, they may be wrong, but it's better to engage with them than not.
Yeah, well, stupid or wrong, people are listening to them, and I think that's the important thing, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And we've had a lot of people on the channel who started off doing things, websites, etc., like Andrew McCutcheon or Ariel Adams, and then, in the early days they would show up at the Basel World, etc., and knock on doors and never be allowed in. And then now you look at that, the degree of access to which they're privy. It shows just how much over that period of time things have changed in the industry.
No, I agree. It's a much more open industry.
It's still not as open as it should be, in my opinion.
No.
And they try to control, the bigger brands anyways, try to control narrative as much as they can. But it is, thanks to people like you, we get to see behind the curtain a little bit and get a proper business, view of what they're doing. So it's really good. So on that topic, what are your thoughts on how social media and content creators are shaping collector tastes and brand strategies?
Oh, that's a good question. I think so. Well, I think you have to differentiate back to your point that it depends on the companies. I don't think Rolex in any way, shape, or form is being influenced by YouTubers, other than the fact that they're aware of somebody like Teddy Baldessar and know that he gets to he has a big enough audience that he actually got as the only YouTuber, as far as I know, got access to the ground scrounger on his sort of YouTube channel. That's a huge thing that somebody like Rolex, who are so insular and so protective, basically said, now's the time to at least, within a controlled environment, go out. I think what you're seeing is it's influencing a lot of micro brands. There's a lot of micro brand power in the YouTube space because there's so many small ones, so you get a lot of exposure, and it's a platform for a lot of companies that otherwise would have no voice whatsoever. I've spoken to Mike France, you mentioned Christopher Ward, and he said, if it wasn't for how they had engaged with YouTubers pre-COVID, they probably wouldn't have had the growth that they had. Where everybody else had a closed door and said, leave us alone and go away, you're a YouTuber, leave us alone. They basically said, if you want to look at a watch, you can look at a watch, talk about our watches, go for it. And it helped them massively. And I think those kind of things, and you see a lot of brands doing it, Maine with Nico Leonard, you've got also sort of other brands. That leverage is huge, and you see more and more people gravitating towards smaller brands, micro brands, indie brands, niche brands. That openness is definitely there, and I do think it's driving something to some extent people away from at least the established brands to some extent, at least in the collectors community. Not that people are completely writing off Rolex. People still want a Rolex, but that's the thing. It does also feed, I think, some level of tribalism. Whether you're the Nico Leonard Hublot hater or you're the anti-Omega person or whatever, it does feed a little bit of it, but in general, it's a positive community. I think that's how I do when I speak to the brands I've spoken to, they do pay attention to what gets said, and they do actually change things in their production, do change things in terms of dial choices. They're not as it influences things like dial choices for seasonal collections. They're more attuned to what sort of flies and doesn't fly. It's no accident that a lot of companies are suddenly pushing out easy adjust bracelets, because everybody's like, it's like the standard comment you have to throw in a YouTube video. Oh, it doesn't have easy adjust. And now everybody's like, okay, we might as well throw it in there. I know Longines did. I know Formex did. You just got to have that easy adjust. So it's sort of a symbiosis that's going on there.
I have opinions about easy adjust bracelets. I've already voiced them many times. I won't do it again. Spare everybody this time.
Well, this conversation may actually logically lead to my next question, although we may have to wait a moment before we see that connection, because I want to talk about fried chicken sandwiches, Mike. Would that be okay with you?
Absolutely.
To bring our audience up to speed, Mike published a video about a year ago, and it was about the Game of Superman Slim, the CMM 2.20.
Yes.
But as often the case with your discussions, the video was really about a much larger theme, and it was, why do all watches end up looking so similar?
Yes.
And of course, there's a fine line between timeless design and safe design. Could you elaborate a little bit on that analogy for the audience?
Yeah. So the reason I used the fried chicken analogy was, I don't remember the quite origins of it in the US, but I'm going to say sort of like Popeye's chicken, or one of those sort of like South state fried chicken joints that don't make their way to Europe, but they exist widely in the US. And suddenly these things really started picking up steam. And then you saw brands like Burger King and McDonald's losing out massively. And now I don't know if it's already the case, but McDonald's sells pretty much more fried chicken than they do, Big Macs, or at least significantly more. That's probably a more realistic claim. And they also have an actual fried chicken. It's not just the McChicken, it's fried chicken. And it's a reflection of how in any market, when you see sort of popularity, you see this trend to fill that gap and see this is an opportunity, this is a gap in our space. And if you want to be part of the big leagues in terms of volumes, you have to you have to deliver on whatever that flavor of the month is. So everybody's got their pumpkin spice latte version, and everybody's got their fried chicken. And at some point, even Rolex has to have a integrated bracelet watch.
There you go. You said it. Thank you.
And you know, I spoke to somebody at IWC about it, and they basically said, well, of course they had to have an integrated bracelet. They were losing sales. Even Rolex was losing sales on their Datejust and whatever watches to brands like IWC that have a, albeit expensive, but a really, really good ingenieur offering. And then you've got, I don't know how many others. You gotta have your fried chicken sandwich. If you don't have a fried chicken sandwich, and people are not walking in your store.
Yeah, you brought up IWC there, and the integrated sports watch craze happened just as they had changed the engineer to a standard case format, and then they had to walk it back after they saw that everybody else is making them, and it's huge success. And then they had to bring back the engineer integrated bracelet. It's actually hilarious if you think about it. They just the forethought that they had was just not there. It was
No.
really strange.
No, completely not. You know, I wouldn't say it's because of intelligent management, but Patek, they just kind of had the Nautilus and stuck with it, and AP had the AP and stuck with it. But IWC, you know, messed around for decades. It's like, let's make it big. Let's make it like a Breitling. Let's make it like a, you know, giant whatever. Make it like a Royal Oak, but not in.
Because they weren't selling.
And they weren't selling. And it's like, what do we do? Okay, we actually have the original design. And by the way, it looks like people actually like these kind of integrated thingamabobs. Let's do that. Okie dokie, boom, right? And it's a boardroom decision. It's a wise one, because why wouldn't you when it's so popular? The thing is, you need to get in early and not on the tail end of the trend. But that's why they do it, and they end up all looking the same, and that's why we've all got everybody's got their version of the black Rolex Submariner, you know, black bezel, black dial, black. With a comfortable steel bracelet and a comfortable easy adjust mechanism, and you've got your integrated bracelet, and you just have those tropes throughout. You got your 3-register chronograph with, you know, a horizontal layout. You have to have that as well. The IWC ABXGP, Hamilton have one. It's like, and it just dumbs things down, it dulls things down, because it's like, oh, I'm reviewing this watch that looks pretty much like the other watch, and it's just a question of which dial you prefer, which brand you prefer. It's like, it's not hugely exciting. I understand why they do it, but it does turn into a very homogeneous, nondescript sort of, you know, mass market environment.
And there's a good chance that when you're talking to micro brands, that the watches are made by the exact same factory.
Yeah. It's not entirely unrealistic, no. You call somebody and say, I need a chronograph. It needs to live up to these specifications. It needs to be it needs to have the dimensions that can hold a Sedita SW200. It's like, oh, do you want it with a custom rotor? No, I don't want the custom rotor. Not this time. I'll do that next time. Are you going to do a custom bridge? No, I'm not going to do a custom bridge. I'm also going to wait that for the upgrade model in the titanium version. It's like, and we'll also put COSC in that one. That'll be cool. And it's like, do you want to do a military version? Yeah, the gradated bezel with, you know, the full gradation instead of just the first 15. Yeah, we'll do that next time. That's going to be our special edition.
Yeah. Sounds like a recipe.
It is a recipe.
So I'm curious then, when you look at a new watch design, what is it that you evaluate first? Is it like an emotional response? Is it commercial viability? Is it specs, long-term coherence, something else entirely? What is
Well, for me personally, it's whether I like it or not. So that's, you know, emotional response. And that's, you know, I take a look at a watch. I've been looking at, I've been looking at 2 watches recently. I've neither the money nor the inclination to buy them yet, but I've been looking at a watch from Trilobe, an integrated bracelet watch, and then Chapek, the Antarctique. And for 2 reasons. One, Trilobe, they have a completely different dial. They don't do hands. They do like this kind of a Resonance kind of deal. And then there's Chapek, which is not because of the dials. The dial is honestly, you know, fine. It looks good. It's well made. But the whole thing is, you turn around, you see a pretty damn impressive movement. And for a lot of high-end watches, you don't get the impressive movement in their entry models. Not that a Patek 26330 isn't an impressive movement, but it's, it's a fair, it's their standard caliber. The Laureato caliber, the GP 3300 also,
You just realized you just went on a, here's the digits for the model numbers.
Yeah,
and
I
stuff.
did. I know. I'm sorry.
You're a little better than you think you are.
but they're workhorse movements. They're the high end workhorse movements. They're not the ones with the black polished screws and the anglash. But when you're looking at those two watches for the price, it's like, okay, both of them have gone a completely different route in terms of the movement. The Trilobe has got a very Breguet-esque kind of look to the back of the movement, in terms of the way they put it together. And when you've got the Chapek, it's got a level of detailing which is absolutely insane. And that's, I just look at it, I was like, wow. That's the thing that speaks to me. It's like, this is what captures my heart. Some new version of a Rolex, which is 0.5 millimeters. I'm talking a lot about a Rolex, but it's stuck in my head right now. It's not going to capture my attention in the same way. When I go then to the YouTube channel, that's when I start talking about commercial viability. Why are they doing this? What are the options? How many people is this going to speak to? Why are they doing this? Is it, is there a path to this? How does it fit into the broader collection? Then those kind of questions come in, because I can love a watch that might not be commercially viable, and I can also love a watch that I, from a visual perspective, might think is utterly boring, but it still appeals to me. For whatever reason, it's a simple watch, and then it's like, okay, I love this watch, even though it's aimed at the quintessential boring businessman, which I am. And it's like I can live with the duality of like liking an ultimately boring watch, and then there's the ones that evoke the emotion. The more I get into watches, and the more I'm in this, it's more the details that capture me. It's a little bit like wine. At first, you can just wine is wine. It's a way to get drunk. And then at some point it's like, okay, I can actually buy a wine that I'm not going to have a headache from the day after. And then at some point you start caring a little bit. It's like, okay, I can actually taste oak or something smoky. And then you start to appreciate it. And then, you're wasting money on yet another stupid thing.
So speaking of evaluating, how do you see the role of independent and micro brands versus legacy giants like Rolex, Omega, and maybe even Tudor?
I think they are forces for innovation and change and creativity and being the polar opposite of what those big brands offer. And I think they should have that role. Any small brand like, Moser or MB&F, if they just said, now we're going to do our own version of the boring black diver and just make a boring black diver, that would be a disservice to themselves and would hurt their business, and it would hurt the industry, because that's where the ideas come from. I don't expect Omega to come up with the groundbreaking new idea. I expect the small ones to come up with it, and then I expect somebody else to jump on the train and say, wow, that was something we didn't see, let's go for it. And you need those small brands. You need those trying things and doing things and offering something that the big ones either are too bureaucratic, too slow moving, too dominant to care or be able to prioritize. I think this is not a watch-related example, but I read recently that, Google have basically not produced a new product since 2007, 2006, 2005, something like that. They have bought things and scaled them, but everything pretty much that they've developed themselves and tried themselves is either dead, discontinued, or non-existent. After 2000, I'm going to say 2008, it might be 2005, it might be 2010. And that says something about the inertia of a big organization. That's not where you get the innovation. The same applies to Meta, in terms of offerings. They're good at making ads, but they're not making good new products. They're good at killing competition. And it's kind of the same thing. You're not going to see the great things from Rolex. You're going to see it from MB&F, and they need to stay true to that.
Ruth. One of the other things that you talk a lot about on your channel is value, and that's where often micro brands and independents come into the conversation. And in that conversation that you often have, Christopher Ward comes up quite a bit. But most recently, you made some pretty bold statements about Longines. Now, that's a brand that I do actually collect personally. So some of those things struck a bit close to the bone, but I can't wholly disagree with them. So can a brand like Longines, or any other for that matter, offer value and scale while differentiating itself with striking designs? And if so, who's best set to do it?
Value and scale. So actually, I'm going to talk about the Morgan Stanley report in about a week and a half on a video, but I'll share my sort of thoughts on it. I think the overall perspective you have to take into account that despite the fact that we're more people in the world and the world's population is growing, the number of people, it's not like washing machines. More people in the world means more people will over time need washing machines, but more people in the world does not mean more people need watches because it's a luxury. That means, and I think the thing that's changing is where it used to be a tool, it no longer is, but also there are so many other signifiers of status other than watches. Your premium Plantronics headphones, or your Bang & Olufsen headphones, or your Sennheisers, or whatever the hell is important to you, or your car, or your Lululemon pants, I don't know, whatever. There's all sorts of stuff. So there's everything competing for people's money. And what you're seeing is then you see the big brands, they're concentrating on these really, really expensive or rich customers. And then you've got this mid-range, which in theory is dying or declining over time. It's not going to be gone in 20 years or 50 years, but it's dying right now. And what you're seeing is brands like Longines, they've essentially declined quite consistently over the last couple of years, but they've also been the biggest, at least in that sort of, $1,000, $3,000, $3,500 space. But if you look at the Morgan Stanley's numbers, you can see Frederic Constant, who price-wise are kind of ballpark in the range, give or take. They've grown quite significantly. Raymond Weil, grown quite significantly. Christopher Ward, they're on the list for the first time, selling around 40,000 watches. So what you're seeing, I think, is that there is still a customer base for interesting and exciting designs in this sort of value range. And the reason people are going to Frederic Constant, Raymond Weil, and Christopher Ward, and potentially some others, and less so to Longines, is because they have been able to position themselves as value, for one, true or not, and different for a second thing. And when the incumbent in terms of Longines, you can probably still convince people of the value piece, but with that size, it's hard to really push the innovation and creativity angle because you've got so much legacy in terms of, you've heard of them, they're old, they're not the new player. At some point, Christopher Ward, Frederic Constant, and Raymond Weil will also be not the new player anymore. So I think right now the strength is on those smaller brands, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that Longines can do something. I think some of the stuff they do on the Ultracrons has a lot of potential that can speak to enthusiasts. I think they can do much more with that kind of perspective on really high value, high spec. I also think they could do better to work on stuff like their quartz entry. There's still this kind of, you have the cheap quartz and then you have the mechanical, and it's like there's a weird tiering there where they could probably do better in terms of positioning something more interesting. And then they kind of, just generic in their swatchy branding, which is just dull, and that could help them. But I think those smaller brands, those are the ones that are leveraged to it right now, because they're coming in as outsiders and saying, we can give you a lot for nothing, for very relatively speaking less, and we're creative and we make nice designs. It's not just a Chinese factory brand where we copied everything. We did actually try to do something ourselves, and they're doing good things, and people are responding to that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You've also made videos about mistakes collectors make. What's the biggest lesson you've learned personally from collecting?
Wait as long as possible before buying.
Yeah, that doesn't speak to me. I'm one of those impulse people, so I have a hard time with that one.
The initial love, I always say, go down, look at it, and leave. Come back another day. It saves you money, and you fall in love, and you can go back to that store and be super annoying to the AD. They're just happy to be talking to somebody who's not at the Rolex side of the store. It's like, oh, you want to talk about Blancpain? Yay! I'm so happy. And they're like super happy to deal with you then. That's been a big learning for me, because I've far too many times fallen in love with something, bought something, and like short time afterwards it's like, this is a mistake. So I've curbed my ridiculous bipolar impulsiveness.
I'm almost 30 years into it. I'm still being impulsive, but I find that, I do buy watches mostly pre-owned, so I don't take as much of a bath as,
No.
if you bought them brand new and then moving them. And I've found that learning through acquiring them has been fun. It's been a
Yes.
really cool journey.
Yeah.
And the problem, though, after all these years, is figuring out what you want next
Yes.
after you've had so many. And it's a
Agree.
little bit of an issue right now with me. I'm jonesing for something else, and I don't know if there's anything that I really want right now, other than something that I cannot afford. Right?
Yeah. There's
You know,
always
there's
one you
always
can't afford.
yeah.
But
There's like the Chapek and all this, and
yeah.
there's a Gronfeld that I absolutely adore. That the Delta Force, I think it is. Their sporty watch. God
Yeah.
damn love that watch, but it's never going to happen. So, but in the affordability spectrum, on the $3,000 to $5,000, I've had everything I ever wanted. I don't know
Yeah.
what else I'm going to get next. I still love the watch that I wear most of the time, which is my Fortis Novanaut.
Yeah.
But I want something new.
Yeah, I get you. I get you completely, because you want that newness, and you want sort of that. I do the same. I
I don't think it's the wanting the watch. It's the hunt and the
Yeah.
anticipation of the next one that
Yes.
I'm addicted to. I
Absolutely.
believe
Yeah.
more so than actually acquiring the watch and enjoying it.
True. No, it's the hunt of going down and looking, and then researching about and the history behind it,
Yeah,
and then having it on the wrist and taking a photo, and it's like, oh, this looks beautiful. Then looking at another watch, and it's like, oh, but this is, and then it's like, then it could work here, and I could use it for this. Yeah, I completely get you.
yeah.
I can spend days. My wife is like, you're thinking about watches right now. It's like, yeah. It's like, which one?
She actually asked you which one. Me, I'd say you're thinking about watches. Yeah, again.
Yeah, I get away with more now that I have the YouTube channel. It's kind of an integrated part of our lives these days. So she's, we'll sit at a restaurant. She's like, okay, test me. That guy over there, that's a Patek, right? And I was like, yes, that's a Patek. And the guy next to him, isn't that is that a Vacheron 46? No, it's a 56, but close enough.
That sounds like fun.
We a few minutes ago, we touched a little bit on this idea when we were talking about the ingénieur. And in a recent video, you said that the time of iconic watches is coming to an end. And in case our audience hasn't caught that, maybe you could explain your theory behind that, because I really thought it was an intelligent take on this. And then to counter your own argument, I'm curious, do you think that there's somebody out there who could surprise us? Who might that be with it that would surprise us with a new icon?
Yeah, so the logic behind it is, so I sort of walk through what makes something an icon, other than a brand saying this is our icon, and it's a sum of different things. So it's a product of the time that it was in. So the reason we have iconic dive watches, they almost all come from the period where people were sort of going with Jacques Cousteau and trying to go really, really deep. Moonwatch also had a specific connection to NASA and all those kind of things. Racing chronographs, etc. So that's one component of it. The second component of it is, a lot of them are also products of risk taking, in terms of coming out with a new product that didn't exist before. So dive watches were a new thing. The Nautilus, the Royal Oak, the Ingenieur were all responses to a change in the market where they had to do something or risk dying. And there's also a question of continuity, willingness to take a risk, throw something out there, and then stick with it. So the Daytona is a good example. It wasn't really a success initially. They didn't produce that many, and then they stuck with it. They refined it, and then suddenly it turned out to be popular, right? So all those kind of things, they add up to, and then you also have the situation. I think that's the fourth piece. Is you also have this situation where a lot of these icons are also connected with either celebrities, not from endorsements in the sense of, you've been paid to wear the watch, but they've been seen on the wrists of famous people, or people chose to wear them voluntarily, and they become part of the sort of zeitgeist of the time. And when you look at the way everything is, my argument was, when you look at the way everything is done today, when you go to the Met Gala or the Oscars or the Globes, everybody's paid to wear a specific watch. You can almost tell who's wearing what, so there's nothing original to it, and people know that. The second one is back to the sort of homogeneity of the market. Brands have no interest in trying to come up with something original. They want to come up with something that sells. And if they already have something that sells, what sells is a new dial variant.
Right.
So that's, so you have a whole lot of things basically lowering the likelihood of a brand taking a chance, coming out with something, sticking with it, in it at the right moment in time. It's not, it's not unlikely that there will be icons again, but it's more and more rare because everything is so structured, so manufactured, so fabricated, that and everything's also so hype focused. It's like, oh, this is our drop, and then we're gone, then we move on to the next thing. So 6 months later, we've already forgotten about it. There's nothing that says, okay, we're going to stick with this for 25 years. It's like, no, we did this now, and we're going to move on. That doesn't lend itself to iconic status in the same way. So that's the risk. Could it happen? Of course. And I made the bold statement that something like the Hublot Classic Fusion could essentially end up becoming an icon, because it's such a sort of picture of its time and the commercialism of its time. I think I mentioned the MB&F, the horological machines, one of the legacy machines. They're doing something, they're very niche and they're not broadly appealing necessarily, but there's potential there. And it's always hard. That's the way the prediction thing becomes hard. It's like, what is popular now that came out recently or in the last 10 or 15 years is so good that people are still going to be talking about it and screaming and desirable of it in 25 years? That's a really hard question. Can it happen? Absolutely. But I think there's a lot of factors speaking against it, because everything becomes so derivative and so standardized and so, corporately decided in a game plan. That's sort of my thing. I think there was less control in the 60s. There was less control in the 50s. There was less control in the 70s. And today it's one big corporate machine, and they're not interested in icons. They're interested in sales.
So if we were to combine what we've been saying about micro brands and independence and this other juggernaut of established brands, are we in a moment of creativity boom, or are we in nostalgia cycle right now?
That's a good question. I'm leaning more, I wouldn't say pure nostalgia, but we are very, we're in a cycle where a lot of watches are retro inspired and back catalog inspired, and even small brands. So if you go through them, you got Venezianico just as an example. They're sort of Redentore or whatever it's called, Arsenale, I think, basically looks like a Parmigiani Tonda. Then you have Maine, who have the Manhattan. It basically looks like a nondescript 1970s version of a Vacheron Constantin. You've got brands that have their version of an Ingenieur. They've got their version of so on and so forth. And, got Monta doing a watch that essentially looks like the Submariner. So there's a lot of leverage in having recognizable, reusable, sort of almost replica level watches. And then you do see things that are truly original for the sort of more high end, and also a few of the sort of cheaper brands that are doing something original. But it is few and far between, I think, to be fair. I think something like, and I'm always, every time I say Christopher Ward, somebody writes, he's a shill, he's being paid, and I'm not. But I might as well just throw it out there. The Bel Canto is cool. I'm not a big fan of it myself because I think there's too much going on. But from a design perspective, and it's not a true chiming mechanism, but it rings. That's the mixture of that level of complication, that level of design, that level of finishing and creativity at that price point is impressive. You have to give them that, whether you like the watch or not, whether you like their logo and Christopher Ward and it's like, complain. That's freaking original. That's well thought out. It just is. And whether that'll turn into an icon, maybe not. It depends on how Christopher Ward does and how long they keep it there, and all sorts of other things. And if a famous person wears it, but that's something that was original. That was something that moved the needle in terms of, wow, it's not just another dive watch.
Yeah, the Belcanto was lightning in a bottle.
Yes.
I think they really. I don't think they even realized what they had on their hands until well after launch, and they tried to replicate that kind of success with the Loco.
Yes,
and I don't think they did as well with it. I don't think it's selling as well as the Belcanto initially did.
From what I spoke to them, that's probably true. Yes, but that they are trying to recreate that moment. Absolutely, and it's like, okay.
It's like I said, lightning in a bottle. It's like it's if you're starting a YouTube channel and your goal is I'm going to create a viral video. Good luck. You're not.
Yeah, you can't do that. No,
you can't.
No.
You can't.
No, you can do your best. I've got an idea of what will do a little bit better, but I can't predict if it's going to do 1.2 million views or something. You can't do that. You can put out your best and then you post and pray. And that's the risk, and that's why they go back to and doing simple dive watches and stuff like that, because that's where the volume is, and it's like,
and that's what sells.
And you can speak highly of MB&F, but the fact is, they're also niche. They're not going to sell millions of them, one, because they're expensive as FU something, but the other thing is, it's also a relatively limited niche of people that think it's attractive to have a big bulbous weird fishbowl kind of thing on your wrist. It's not exactly broadly appealing, and you really have to believe it and just keep doing it until somebody's like, okay, they actually mean it, then we're gonna do that. We're gonna buy that one.
Yeah, it's for real.
It's like, this was not a joke. They actually meant it.
So how do you personally approach buying a watch? Is there a philosophy you follow when you invest in a piece? Apart from waiting.
Yeah, no. No, I don't know if there's a philosophy. I think it's sort of a journey in oh God, such a cliche. But it's the previous watches and the watches I have kind of inform my interests and where I'm going. And I think when I was early and I was into the whole name brand thing, because of course I was there at some point, then it was, expanding from the bigger name brands to the smaller name brands. But more and more I look for things that are different, and more I look for things, obviously beautiful in my eyes, but things that I've grown to appreciate in a different way. So movements are becoming more and more interesting to me than I ever thought they would be, and I never thought I would become like a movement guy. But then you turn them over and you start realizing that's also because I've been to the factories, and you talk with an engineer, he's like, and then you talk with the guy who's doing hand anglage. And then he's like showing you a bridge, and he says, this one is done by a machine and this one is done by hand. It's like, initially you look at it, it's like, I can't tell the difference. And then you get it under one of those little glass magnifying things. And it's like, okay, you can see it right in the corner there. It's like, that's where you can see it. And then the guy shows you black polishing, which is obviously way out of my financial league. But then you start to understand the kind of work that goes into it. I think that's what's driving me right now. It's those watches that have a piece of flavor of that handmaidedness, a piece of flavor of that sort of old school, not completely by a machine thing that really captures me. And if they can do that in an aesthetic, good looking package of something that I would, also, wear, because I'm still not on, just having safe queens, then that's what captures me. And that's why the Chopic's on the list, why something like a Trilobe is on the list. It's got those little things, and they're doing something different, and they're trying something that is not your run of the mill. And then every now and again, I think I just wrote to an AD yesterday. It's like, how hard is it to get a hold of the Pelagos FXD, the blue one? Because I've got the black one and I don't really need it and it doesn't make sense. But it's just a design that I've grown to find incredibly appealing. There's something about the fixed lugs that I just love, which is weird, but I just do.
I'm not sure we can be friends.
You don't like fixed lugs?
No, I don't like NATO
doesn't
strap,
like NATO
pass-through or anything.
straps.
Just no, just it's wrong. That watch, I love the FXD. I borrowed one from a friend for a little while, and it is perfect. I love the dial, I love the bezel, I love the color of the blue, I love the thickness of the case, I love the material. Just the stupid lugs. It's gotta have. I gotta have a bracelet on it at least. I mean, come on. Just why limit yourself to just pass-through straps?
Yeah, no. And that's precisely why I like it. There's something about the lugs that just makes it different, and it's the dumbest thing. And I agree with you. It is, from a sort of functionality perspective, just stupid. But that's kind of why I just like, I can only wear it with a strap.
No, you can be friends with Brent then. Brent likes NATO straps and stuff. I still can't get around putting a $5 piece of nylon on a $6,000 watch.
Well,
Okay.
you can buy an Omega NATO strap that'll set you back $200. It's still
sure, but it's still $5
nylon,
worth of nylon.
Exactly. But you pay $200.
Yeah, and it says Omega on it.
Exactly.
So while we're on the idea here of some trends, what's a trend in the industry, Mike, that you hope quietly fades away?
I'm glad pink is gone. It's dead for the moment. It'll come back eventually, but pink pisses me off. It's just, stop it. It's like, ooh. It's like, look at me. I'm a confident man. I can wear pink. It's like, just stop. Just don't. Can't take it seriously. But I think there's two trends. I do think by now it's like, we've got 797,000 versions of integrated bracelet watches. And yes, the two I've mentioned I'm interested in right now are integrated bracelet watches. I'm completely aware of both irony and the hypocrisy of that. But we don't need any more. We really don't. You guys just need to stop. It's like somebody needs to throw a brick at the next person in the room that does that. It's like, no, stop. It's like, Wolfgang has said no.
Stone dials.
And yeah, that was my second one.
Aventurine and God damn.
Especially in the low end. I mean, everybody's doing it, but in the low end, it's like, okay, we've got this derivative watch, which isn't particularly special, but look, it's got Aventurine now. I mean, fine, it can look good, but it just does not impress me. Well, it does to some extent, because I was spoken to a tile manufacturer the other day, and it's, chipping and speed and stuff where you have to cut in them. It does have something, but stone dials is like Meteorite a couple of years back. They don't always look great, and it's very hit or miss. And that's one of the things that they're really pushing hard as an industry, because they can make there's money in it.
Yeah,
they can push a bigger premium, and I've got my favorite example, which is the Zenith Defy triple annual calendar lapis lazuli dial, which is like $8,000 more expensive than the exact same watch with the exact same movement, just with the lapis lazuli dial. And yes, as I always say, it's a little bit more expensive to machine, but it's not $8,000 more expensive. It's like, seriously, guys, you're pulling a fast one, and it's not reasonable. And so stone dials is just way overdone. Tiger's Eye is like, guys, just, it's cool, I like it, that's fine, stop, move.
Yeah, I heard that Chinese factories had gone around buying up a lot of these stones, and at some point they all decided we're going to start unloading them onto the micro brand market, and brands are just picking them up everywhere, and it's trying to capitalize, like you said, on Rolex comes up with a Tiger Eye dial for a special project, and all of a sudden that's the dial that's in everybody's watches.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing, but it's also because it's such an insular industry. And it's like, you've got the manufacturer's version of GPHG, which is EPHJ, which runs in June or July or thereabouts. You basically got all the manufacturers and all the brands going there to look at the machines and look at what they can do, and they also sort of see what's on trend. And then everybody kind of buys the same things. Not everybody, but a lot of them buy the same things from the same people. And then that's why does the same? Because everybody's pushing the same things. Like, look, we've got this cool. We're doing, a green stamped dial, and it's like, yay, everybody's got a green stamped dial now. And it's because everybody speaks together. It's like all other industries. Everybody knows each other, and they all get along well, and they buy them from each other, and they kind of push the same things. And sometimes they just get hooked on sort of this internal idea. It's like, stone dials. This is the next thing. And then, they really hope we jump on it, and it's vastly overrated. It has its place, but not to the extent that it has right now.
Agreed. And when you look at your own collection, you mentioned before you're progressing towards the Chapek and some other watches. What does it say about you and how it evolved over time?
Oh, that's a personal question. I think it says very banal, but I like what I like. And I don't care what other people think. So I will.
I like that answer.
Yeah, I think that's the short one. I like what I like, and I've been more clear on that. I'm not beholden to any brand. I'm not beholden to any specific design. Sometimes I'll buy something that's completely middle of the road and predictable, and sometimes I'll buy something completely different. And sometimes I'll buy something which is just because it just did something for me, and it'll be a cold day in hell when somebody else decides what I want to buy. That it's my opinion, it's my feeling, and it should be with everybody else. Buy what you like. Don't listen to a bald middle-aged YouTuber with a beard. I have nothing intelligent to say when it comes to your personal taste. So yeah, no, that's the thing, and that's why I'm also have no problem with wearing an Apple Watch every now and again.
Look, I made fun of the Apple Watch earlier, and there's time and place for those watches. I understand that. I have an addictive personality, and when it comes to my work, I am on top of replying to emails in really rapid pace, and that's part of my personality. And if I had a watch that warned me that these things were happening in real time, I would be obsessed with it, and I probably would wear it more often than my regular watches. So I'm staying very far away from them because I know how I am. So
yeah, no. I mean, when I look at my job, I'm in HR, and everybody typically has an opinion about HR people, and I like to think that I'm not like most HR people, and I usually get told by the people that hire me that I'm not like most HR people. I take that as a compliment, and that's why I like having watches that are not like most watches, unlike the ones that most watch buyers buy.
Yeah, I work for Isotope, so that should tell you a little something about very different watches and being special. So.
So let's return to industry then for a second. What's the biggest misconception that enthusiasts have about how watch brands operate internally?
I like that question.
Oh, gosh, that's a difficult one. You said you weren't going to put me on the spot.
I said we wouldn't surprise you, but
I never said anything about not putting you on the spot.
No, these are the kind of questions I'm like, I should be doing this for a video instead of just answering them random. This is stuff I usually think about and spend time considering.
So you should have an answer.
True. So what misconceptions? I think a couple of things. One, how much more it's about manufacturing than it is about watchmaking. These are manufacturing companies. Maybe not MB&F, but even MB&F or Cobalt Force or whatever. The kind of people that sit in their operations, the COO, these people are looking at time to build, minutes per movement, waste of material, input time, input lag, all that kind of stuff. It's like a massive supply chain efficiency operation. And there is the creative piece about, coming up with the movement if they do the movements themselves. But for the ones that really manufacture, I'm not talking about the micro brands that source everything from all over the place and just assemble it. But but it's manufacturing that is at the core of what they do, and they are absolutely, a lot of them are absolutely brilliant at the, the microns of millimeters tolerances they can get to. That's engineering precision more than anything, and that's what makes some of these watches so incredibly impressive. And we talk about the movements and talk about in-house and all stuff, but the ones that are really good, they master the manufacturing, and that's what people get wrong about it. It's not the old guy sitting in a shed with some lady carrying a milk jugs and milking a cow, and then he's like yodelay here and Rittersport and whatever the hell they call it. It's not. That's not. I think that's the one thing people get wrong. The other misconception is that they have this belief that it's like a massively profitable industry. And it is for Patek Philippe. It probably is, well, not for Grubel Forsay at the moment, because they're going through an absolute disaster of a show there. But for the very high end, but when you look at the numbers that are available, because it's manufacturing, despite its luxury, it's nowhere near as profitable as you would think.
Right.
And I think, as an aside, this is why LVMH and Richemont, they're having trouble, because they thought it was like all other luxury goods, and making a diamond necklace is infinitely easier to turn a profit on than a mechanical movement and case that needs to live up to all sorts of specifications. It's just so much more expensive to do, and people just assume that they're just making money hand over fist. And bar some exceptions, they're not. The ones that are making good money, like Rolex, yes, they're desirable, but they're also making good money because they are absolutely ridiculously good at the manufacturing piece. I would go so far as to say, within any industry, bar maybe Apple, Rolex is probably top 3 in the world in terms of pure skill in manufacturing it in mass market.
And they're totally vertically integrated as well, which is, and they own every single part of the supply chain. So
yes,
yeah, they've done such an incredible job.
Exactly. Well, except for the fact I read on one of my comments from on my YouTube channel, apparently they don't have any factories in Switzerland because there are too many mountains. So where would they put them? I'm just
goes back to my opinionated comment. Yeah.
you can't argue with that logic. There's no room for factories in Switzerland. There's only cows and mountains. That's it.
And milking cows and cheese. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's all.
It's interesting. I was just last week at Alexandre Beauregard's studio in Montreal, and of course he does the high end gemology and the lapidary art that goes into those works, and he collaborates with people like Vianney Halter. And some of these watches are selling for 120,000 Swiss francs. And, they sell it. So his last run of the Ulysse was 10 watches. You can do the math on that. That's an awful lot of money. But he's also a man who will tell you right away, I haven't paid myself a salary for 15 years.
Yeah.
So all the research and development, the travel to Tucson, the selecting of the stones, the wastage of the stones, the travel back and forth, having an apartment in Switzerland, having a foot in Montreal, with all of these things for an independent. And he's, going up against juggernauts like Van Cleef and Dior and Chanel. And so there isn't a lot of profit, as you say. But what also surprised me, and I'm just commenting on something you just said too about manufacturing, is just how incredible manufacturing is in Switzerland. And that goes from the smallest little family manufacturer, like the people who produced the loom for the Trident, and the incredible skill and the high level of precision that's going on there. But like you say, it's not romance. They're not sitting in the back room, using chisels and hand tools. But nonetheless, it's a small family in a 2-story home that does this incredible work. And then on the far end, you have like Boncourt and Commodore, where they're making Rado's high-tech ceramic, for example. And you go through that entire process and think, my God, this is absolutely insane. Who came up with this? And just to understand, sometimes people say, well, a watch is overpriced or whatever. But when you go and you take a look at these processes, and you know that every process is an extra cost, it's quite an impressive market. But you can see that the margins are slim across the board. Very interesting.
No, yeah, it's very much the case. It's this fat cats sitting with smoking cigars and just rolling in sort of Scrooge McDuck levels of money. I mean, obviously the CEO of Rolex probably is sleeping fine and has a personal chauffeur, but as an industry, it's not hugely profitable. And all those small companies, it's not necessarily hand to mouth, but it's hard work. And the first 5, 10, 15 years, you're maybe not making a single cent until, for some odd reason, somebody latches onto your product, and then boom, then it's moving, right? And you have a few examples that break that mold, but for the most of them, it's a slog to make decent money. Also because it's so volatile. You have 3, 4, 5 years where in 2, 3 years where everything was going gangbusters, and now pretty much everybody's shedding 10, 15, 20% of volumes. And because it's the Swiss, most of them are trying not to fire people. I mean, if give a call to our American tech bros and tell them, hey, how about you decline 10% in volumes, you have 2 years where you don't have profits, and you not fire anybody. That's not going to be the best business case that board is going to approve. So there's also there's something quite admirable about the way the Swiss approach that, and also the Germans, Klaus Hütter and stuff like that. And they're very defensive of the industry because they know it's also part of keeping it alive and all sorts of other things. So it's a big thing.
What's a watch that you respect immensely but would never personally wear?
I'm trying to think of which one. There's a couple. I don't know if I respect the Bel Canto immensely. I respect it, but not immensely. It's probably the word that's tripping me up. I think of newer models, I'll give you 2 examples, 2 for different reasons. The one, the Grübel Force Nano-Fodorant handmade, from a movement perspective, it's a technically amazing achievement. From the pure, manufacturing or sort of handmadeness, whatever you want to call it, is also, mind-boggling the amount of time they put into, sitting with a little hammer and stamping out things and hand langlaging. I just think the thing's ugly. It's just not. It's just, it's fine. It's impressive. It's amazing. But it's just no. It's kind of like the car, the Pagani Zonda, also a car that's absolutely bananas, but it looks weird, and it's like it's too much. So aesthetically, it just does not do it for me at all. The other one, which I've actually owned, and this is going to hurt a lot of people's feelings, is the Rolex Explorer. It was one of those watches where I was like, you're supposed to love the Explorer because somebody walked near a mountain and maybe not went up a hill with it or something. And it's kind of the watch that, as a YouTuber, you have to do a video about how the Rolex Explorer is amazing at some point. I haven't done mine yet, but we'll see. But it's kind of a rite of passage to a certain extent. Also, like you also have to say Casio is God tier. But I bought it, and I bought it in an airport because it was just for sale, and it wasn't on a wait list. I was in Poland at the time, in Warsaw, and I saw it. I arrived in the morning, and I saw it was on sale. And I was like, is it on sale? Yeah, it's on sale. And then I was like, okay, that's interesting. I went off to work, went into the center of Warsaw, worked for 8 hours, and went back to the airport because I had to fly home the same day. I was like, it was still there. It's like, this is not waitlist. No. I was like, I have to buy the thing. It was a 39 millimeter, so the 121, don't remember, whatever, 39 millimeter. The old version, the previous one. And then, I bought it because you're supposed to, and I just wore it for like 3 or 4 days, and I was like, this was a mistake. And it's not a bad watch. It's not much different than a Oyster Perpetual. It's not much different than, a Datejust without a fluted bezel. It has its characteristics. It's got the 3, 6, and 9 and stuff like that. And I was just looking at it, and it's like, what's the fuss about? But I have a massive respect for things. So I ended up selling it within like 6 months, 7 months.
And you turned a profit, right?
Oh, yes, I did. Very much so. That was flipping on very much flipping it. Not on purpose, but it ended up being a profit. But I respect it because it embodies a lot of that simplicity that people want from true tool watches. It embodies, whether you believe the storytelling or not the storytelling, it is one of, those first true practical tool watches which has only one function. It tells time, and it does it simply. It's legible. It's easy to read. It does everything. So I have a respect for the heritage it has, its iconic status, and also sort of the emotion that a lot of people have towards it. But I look at it like it's an Oyster Perpetual with the 369 on it. And now I'm definitely going to get killed. But yeah,
no climbing any mountains. You'll be fine.
Yeah, no, exactly. But no, it just doesn't. I respect it, but it does nothing. Nothing at all.
So changing gears a little bit here, are there any topics or formats you haven't tackled yet on your channel that you're excited to explore in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I want to do different things. I think at some point I want to do my version of a Nico Leonard video. I don't know if I'm capable of it.
So basically get mad at the camera and yell a little bit.
Just scream.
Yeah. And then call people names and just.
And I'm at such a loss because I don't even have TikTok installed, so I wouldn't know where to start in terms of getting TikTok videos to comment on. I have to call my 12-year-old child. It's like, how do I install TikTok? I don't know. I'm 15. I'll give up. Nobody knows. Is it like MySpace? Who would know?
No, probably not. We're too old for TikTok. I don't even want to.
Yeah.
I do want to actually to still sticking with the 3 principles I said in the beginning. I do want to do factory tours the way not in the way Teddy does, but I want to do factory tours as well. I want to show people and sort of add my perspective to that. I do want to talk to some people and have people from the brands on camera and talk to them and find an interesting format for that. I haven't nailed it quite yet, but I'm trying to get to a point where I can do that. So that's one of the things, 2 of the things I want to do. Because I want to open up the doors. I want to expose people to some of the things that I'm learning and take them on the journey that I am as well when I walk through those buildings. So that's some of the things. And then I also want to I think it's what's it called, Wristwatch Revival, the guy who does the
Marshall.
we
had him on our podcast.
I can't do that, but I want to build a watch. Not a collab. I don't want to sell a watch, but I actually want to be a watchmaker for a day.
Yeah.
And some of those kind of things, go through the process, sit with the manufacturer, not just taking pictures of a machine, say this machine does that, but if some brand is unwise enough to let me, I want to sit in front of the cam and the CAD and the cam and fiddle around and make my own design and see if I can do things without burning off 14 tools at $14,000 or whatever it costs. I would love to do that thing because it's the creative part and it's also sort of getting close to the production and getting sort of my hands dirty. I think that would be fun to try.
Well, now it's out there, so it's time to manifest.
It's gonna happen. I just need to find the time.
That'd be really cool. So this is a question we often ask content creators. What's your advice for aspiring watch content creators? How do they find their voice in a crowded space?
Well, I've used my principles, I suppose. I believe truly that if in anything, try to add something new or different. That should be your goal. Then you can work on making it good. But doing what everybody else is doing is going to get you nowhere. It's not the most dense community. I take my cues not from so much from watch the watch space. I watch a lot of tech videos. I watch a lot of auto videos. I watch, economics videos. I try to see what they're doing because they're bigger, they're more established. So there's actually more creativity there than there is in the watch space. Don't copy Britt Pierce or me or Adrian Barker or Nico Leonard or whatever. Go look what other communities are doing and then add your personal flavor, your personal spin to it. And then figure out whether or not that personal spin flies. There's 8 billion people on the planet. You'd be surprised. But the originality, trying to add something to the conversation rather than replicating somebody else's conversation, I think that's the key.
You know what? That's awesome advice. That's awesome advice. When we started this podcast, the three of us were thinking it was going to be just three dudes talk about watches once every 2 weeks. And there are a lot of podcasts out there. And there are a lot of podcasts about friends talking about watches that just released or what they're wearing or wrist checks. So when we started doing the interview process, the interview style of podcasting, we were doing interviews of 45 minutes, an hour, and then we started doing them a little longer.
Yeah.
We're at an hour and a half now, and we're probably gone for another 10, 15 minutes. I don't think anybody else is doing it quite like we are.
No.
And I think that there's an appetite for these longer form conversations where people actually get to know our guests.
Yes.
I've mentioned this on the last show. It's one of my favorite episodes we've had with Andrew McCutcheon, because Andrew is a consummate professional, and when you see him on camera or in a podcast, he is on.
Yes.
Right? He is playing a character of Andrew McCutcheon alive.
Yes.
So when we had him on the podcast and we had him on for almost 2 hours, he became Andrew McCutcheon, the dude.
I can imagine.
They talked about guitars. We talked about music. We talked about, and it was great. And we had a lot of comments from people saying, that it was nice to finally meet Andrew McCutcheon, even though we've seen thousands of hours of him online. We finally got to meet the guy. And I hope that people now get to meet you and see the man behind the intelligent conversations on YouTube. So that's fantastic. I agree with you 100%. Find your voice, find your thing. It took us a little while to get there, and we're hopefully somewhat there now. You've obviously doing some no one else is doing, and it's obviously working. That's great advice. Anything else?
No, and it does. There's 8 billion people on the planet, and I love the fact. And to your point about videos, if you go to YouTube and ask them what to do, they'll say make short form content, which is easy to do with things flashing on the screen. And you ask AI, and it'll say the same thing. Do product reviews and talk about Rolex, Tudor, and Omega. The world is yes, and it'll also tell you to make an integrated bracelet.
And stone dials.
With the stone dial, yeah. So no, that is the death of creativity. It's like there is a world with people that want something different, and they want something that you have to offer. And if you over time can develop the skill and the capability to also deliver it in a way that's moderately communicable, then you'll be fine. But try to add something to the conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So last fun question from me. If you could have dinner with any figure in watch history, who would it be and why?
In watch history? Oh. Oi. That's a difficult one. He's still alive, but Roger Smith.
Yeah, that'd be a great conversation.
That would be.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. There's an integrity to what he has done and a focus that he has held on to. Philippe Dufour might also be on that list. He's pretty crazy old watch dude in a barn with somebody milking cows outside. Essentially, it's as close as you can get, right? But that's in both cases a dedication to the craft and a uncompromising love for those little things, and none of the sort of show of FP Jean and the Jacob and Go people. It's just love of watches. That's the person I want to meet.
You know what? I'd watch that video. You going over there, do the factory tour, and then you sitting at the bench with Roger Smith over your shoulder,
Yeah.
building something. I would watch the crap out of that.
Yeah.
Let's make it happen.
Roger, if you're listening, maybe I'll meet you at British Watchmakers Day or something. We'll see.
Yeah, that's coming up too. Yeah. So.
But those are the ones, definitely.
Very cool.
Well, now we asked our listeners also if they had questions for you. We received a few, so we'll jump to those here as we finish up. So this is from Matt Jr. _1971 on Instagram. I'd be interested in Mike's take on the current state of the industry. Omega is falling like a star on the Morgan Stanley report, but more commentary on what the top 10 represents.
Well, again, I've got a video coming, but we will shed light on this beforehand. So I think the prevailing logic, I spoke about it on the Longines thing, but the prevailing logic is everybody has to go up market to kind of go towards the rich customers that you'll sell less watches, but you can make more money on the individual watches. For me, I think it's everybody's standing on the iceberg. The iceberg is sinking, and they crawl, up the spire so they sort of in less and less space. So I think what you're seeing is everybody's kind of chasing this thing, and everybody's congregating around this sort of, let's aim for this rich buyer. So everybody either wants to be like Rolex, wants to be like Patek, or wants to be like AP. And I think that is going to prematurely kill a couple of brands because the way to survive is either you are Rolex, Patek, or AP, or Richard Mille, or you are something different. And they are not realizing that they need to be something different. Everybody is largely trying to do what they've always done and just fight between themselves to kind of take up the scraps of what the big brands leave for the rest of them. But the ones that are succeeding are the ones that are not aiming to be part of the inner circle, but are trying to create their own circle somewhere else. And I think that's the journey. So and I think that the example is Grübbel Forsey. I think Grübbel Forsey are a fantastic example of this. Grübbel Forsey, let's go before COVID, they were selling under 100 watches a year. They were selling each watch for $500,000. Then they get a new CEO in, and he's like, "Hey guys, how about if we sold 500 watches?" And everybody's like, "Oh, 500, that's more than 100. Great, let's do that." And it's like, but we're going to sell them at 250,000 instead of 500,000. And then it was like, no, that sounds like a bad idea. But no, wait. If we multiply 250,000 by 500, that's a bigger number than 100 by 500, right? And it was like, yeah, it's a bigger number. And then they start chasing this, and they build a big old factory, and they start to in-house everything in this chase for volume. And 500 is still small volumes, but for a brand like them, 500 is a lot, right? Going from 100 to 500. And to become essentially in sort of an absurd way more accessible. It's like, why? And now the guy's out. The one of the owners, the original founders, is out. They've dropped that strategy completely and realized it was the dumbest idea ever. And it's like, what should they have done? They should have stuck to the guns. It's like, make 100 really, really well-made watches, just like Philippe Dufour, who makes 25 or however many. Just stick with what you're good at. Don't have these modern capitalists, I'm going to make billions and sell 10,000 watches. No, make 100 good watches. And I think that's the state of the industry. And I think some brands like JLC, Breguet, Blancpain, they have to accept that they are no longer big players. They need to look at smaller volumes, more niche, more specialized. If they don't do that, they're going to have years of sunk costs into trying to be bigger, and they're not going to succeed.
Yeah.
They're not going to go out of business, but they're not going to succeed. They're going to lose money, and then they're going to get offloaded, and then they have to learn to survive at a smaller level. Because they can't. JLC cannot sustain 75,000 watches a year with the brand that they have. Breguet cannot succeed at 18,000 or 20,000 or however many there are. They can survive at 10, but they make 10,000 really good watches. That's what they need to realize.
You said unloading. This has nothing to do with the questions we have here. It's just that you mentioned something there, and we saw Baume & Mercier being unloaded recently. Do you foresee others? You mentioned JLC there. I've heard rumors of Zenith as well.
Yeah, I've read the rumors as well for Zenith. I think the question is who's going to buy them and who has the money. So obviously Damiani Group, who I'd never heard of, have bought Barmatier. The price, I think, if you could technically, I suppose, offload Zenith. They make like 8,000 watches. There's this conversation about whether or not they could become a movement manufacturer more so than you know, or they could add a second leg to their business, which is movement manufacture for others, rather than just being a pure play sort of consumer brand.
I think that was one of the reasons why it was purchased in the first place, because Tag Heuer started using the El Primero for a little while, and I
Yeah,
think that was originally the vision with Zenith, and then it
yeah.
didn't.
But it didn't have, I mean, it hasn't really turned into reality, and they haven't figured out that. And again, I don't necessarily think that. So the problem is who has the money? JLC. Then there's the whole conversation about the current CEO guy trying to do a managed buyout and sort of find the funds to take it private. I suppose that could happen. There's no doubt that LVMH and Richemont, Swatch, my understanding is Hayek doesn't want to sell anything because he's on principle doesn't want to. But the others are brutal and they do not want stuff that doesn't make money. And they've found out that making watches is infinitely harder than luxury goods.
What you're saying, there are more parts in a watch than there is in a purse?
Apparently, I mean, who knew?
This is news to me.
You can't make a watch in Bangladesh, in a sweatshop in Bangladesh. Well, you can, but not a particularly good one. You can also discuss whether or not you can make good leather goods in Bangladesh, but some of them can be. That's my wife's center of interest. But yeah, so I think the question is who has the money, and I'm not sure there's a lot of money bouncing around. I also read, I think it was in the Financial Times or it was in the New York Times, that Breitling is also sort of being slashed in terms of their valuation. So
Yeah, their valuation cut down in half.
yeah, and that's you know, they're owned by private equity. So private equity wants to get rid of a company within 4 to 7 years. It's been 2 ownerships now, but it's essentially a collective over 11 years. And I think 4 or 5 under the current. So they're like really hitting the end stage of actually getting, you know, return on their loans that are super leveraged on all sorts of holding setups that are there. There's no IPO happening anytime soon. Nobody
Oh, they
has
said
that.
IPO 27, 28 is, I think,
Yeah.
was their goal.
It could happen. It could happen, but not now. 27, 28, maybe we'll see what the market is like. And if but again, it's a commercial luxury good. Things could have turned around by then. Then things could be all great. But this is not a sector where, you know, there's a lot of people that want to buy tech stocks and AI. So that's my question is like, who has the money to buy these brands, right? Maybe JLC could find the money to leverage themselves out. Is it going to change anything with the same guy at the helm?
No, probably not.
Probably not. It's like, I mean, people say he's done a lot of good stuff. I still see him as a CFO. He's been a CFO all his life, and he runs the business like a CFO. And there's no surprise that he's come up with an idea of a managed buyout, which means, okay, he understands the economics of it, but does he know anything about brand positioning and finding the right spot for JLC? No.
It's so unfortunate.
Yeah. And JLC is specifically JLC. They've I don't know, maybe it's just the management team, but they got into their heads that they can be, you know, the fourth leg of the Holy Trinity. It's like, no, you cannot. I know you wanted to raise your prices. I know you got your Le Caponier and whatever the hell they called and deux maîtres and stuff like that. Caponier, that's probably no, never mind. But they don't have that level. No matter how much people, they can't be at that range, and they priced themselves out, and now they're fighting to hold on to customers, and they're just not desirable enough, and they had a niche, and they hurt
squandered
themselves.
it. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
They did.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They were best when everybody said they were good value.
Yep. And making things that no one else was making.
Yes, because that's where they fit. They were in a niche of good value, but not your generic sports watches and whatever. Now they're just really expensive, not as good Pateks.
Wow, that's
and that's not a personal opinion.
No. I would agree with that.
Yeah, because most consumers are going to like, what am I going to buy as my first watch? My Patek or a JLC? I'm going to buy Patek. But if I'm in that kind of price range, like save 10,000 and buy a JLC, why would I do that?
Yeah, if you're in that category in the first place, might as
If
well
I've got
buy one.
$40,000 for my first watch, I'm not spending it on a JLC. I'm just
Yeah,
not.
agreed. Agreed. All right, back to the questions from our listeners. That was a great segue, but I apologize for side railing us for a second there. There's something that was on my mind. This one is from @_the_Pabs on Instagram. I wonder sometimes how people get their names. They probably wanted the Pabs, but somebody else has got it, so they put some underscores in there. Um, anyways, how does a career in consulting inform your watch reviews?
Um, Situation, complication, question. If you've worked in consulting, you learn many things, but you learn to structure your argument around situation, complication, question. So what's going on? What's the thing that's making things difficult, and what are you trying to answer? So it's not so much the watch reviews, but it's more the sort of the business analysis piece. I mean, pretty much all my videos are structured around like the way I would do a slide deck. So, I have my intro, and then I have, these are the things I want to go through. This is the key thesis, and these are the supporting arguments, and this is my conclusion. It's kind of dull, but it works, because it's something consultants do really, really well. And a lot of people don't like consultants, but when they walk into a boardroom, they can, better than most specialists and most people in it, they can actually explain to people what's going on and what needs to be fixed, and they can present it in a way that's understandable.
Yeah, a lot of times companies they require someone else outside with the 50,000-foot view that are not
Yeah.
as close as they are to their little minutia
Yeah.
to, give them the proper advice.
Yeah, so that's it. And the other thing then, mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. So when you do your categories of, you have your groupings as like, can you explain things in a quadrant or in ways that makes logical sense? Those are things that I often use in my videos.
Very good. I'm pretty sure he's going to like that answer. So this last question is from our friends at Heron Watches. I don't know if you're familiar with that brand. They're based out of Montreal. They make some dive watches, a couple of dressier models. They're friends of ours. We've worked with them not frequently, but a few times.
Yeah.
From the perspective of a microbrand operating full-time, a small team, dedicated office, and a showroom, steady sales, what's the defining strategic shift that helps a successful microbrand move on to the next level? And once brands start gaining real traction, what's the most common scaling mistake you see them make?
How many are they? And what's their volume? Do you know?
I think that they're probably in the hundreds of sales, 100 pieces a year, maybe a little more. I think they're like
Three
two or
main
three.
guys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
2 or 3 guys. Yeah.
So, and what do they do? Again, I don't know them. Do they build everything themselves?
Yeah, their first offerings was like a vintage inspired dive watch at a very reasonable price with scratch resistant coated steel, Miyota 9 series movements.
Yeah.
Fairly affordable. It's a little bit generic, but there's enough spiciness in there to make them a little different. And the marketing for the first watch was phenomenal.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of things that I would say. Number one, on the commercial, the sort of revenue side, have you planned out beyond your initial first 1 or 2 successes? Are you thinking in Gen 2, Gen 3, Gen 4, Gen 5? You need to not just be thinking of, what's coming out tomorrow. You need to have a long-term plan. I actually watched the guy, that was actually an Andrew McCutcheon video with the guy from Ming, and he said the exact same thing. The one on the revenue side is, we've got a dive watch, and now we're going to make another dive watch. And it's like, what moves the needle in terms of turning it into a collection, turning it into not a interesting single time buy, but a recurring phenomenon that people want to leverage onto. And that requires more long-term product design planning, product planning. And I think that's difficult for a lot of small ones. They sort of get going. It's like, oh, people are buying our integrated bracelet watch. And then they haven't really thought through then what next. So I think that's one strategically important thing. Get down and start thinking about, okay, when are we doing this? When are we doing this? When are we doing this on sort of product development, sort of feature side? The second one, I would say, and that again, I don't think they're quite there yet. If they're at 400 or 500, a couple of hundred volumes, that's still doable. But at some point, you have to start taking more control of parts of the process. So I'll use an example. Studio Underdog have now started, they've basically taken a controlling interest in a company called Horologium because they're starting to assemble themselves. That's a necessary step when you're building between 10 and 15,000 watches. You can no longer trust or sort of leave that part of the exercise to yourselves. So I think that's one of the ones. You don't want to go out and buy big machines. You don't want to start saying, okay, we're at 500 now, we're going to buy a $150,000 machine to make our own custom movements. That if you're going this kind of route, then you're sticking with the Miyota until you got some pretty decent volumes. You get some supplier agreements on them, and then you need to start looking and say, what is our differentiator on sort of the product specs? Are we going to find a better movement manufacturer, or movement supplier, or are we going to better bracelet supplier? So you sort of look at that product roadmap. So what are you aiming for price point wise, and what are you trying to offer in that price point? I think a lot just kind of, well, let's buy more. But when have you got that step? And then that step is typically around the assembly. The next one is around customization, and that's also because that's when you're going to get into the CapEx discussion. So how much money do you really need to, build a bigger factory or build a bigger building or move in a building? And then I think stay small, not in the sense that, if you want to grow, you grow, but don't start investing in big, sexy buildings and expensive branding. Everything needs to be going into a great product. You need to have real control of your supply chain and what you do yourselves, and figure out when it makes sense to take it in-house. And then I think the third one, customer service. Because once you get over, I'm going to say 1,000, the first 100 or 200 people, they are super, super forgiving of your flaws. They're like, okay, your brand, I'm going to support you. It's okay. It's starter things. I'll live with a few niggles. Once you get above 1,000, 1,500, if you're not delivering something good enough, you are going to get Reddit complaints and Trustpilot complaints, or whatever the hell you call it, about the play on the bezel. Customer service is going to be hugely important once you get even moderately sized volumes. And if you get that wrong, then you can pretty much kill all vibe, because initially you are living through hype, you are living through conversation in the local community or the local little people who go to your stores or go to watch meets or online, if you've become popular online, and they will spread like wildfire if people are unhappy with what you're delivering. So those are the three things, I think.
Yeah, after sales service, customer service, very important.
Yeah.
So I think Andrew Betchen said exactly the same thing to us, Mark, when he was talking about what brands does he want to have in his various showrooms around the world. Yeah. And he said they're brands that differentiate themselves, but they're also brands who've taken that next step. And one of those next steps is a really robust customer service. So
yes. Yeah. And then
that
you see that links, because okay, so I've got a new product coming, I've got my plan, but I also know in my next product, I've got, before I had 5% dial defects, I've got 1% dial, or 0.1, whatever Six Sigma number you're aiming for. And then for the 0.1% that have dial defects, every single customer, because it's going to be 3, those 3 customers get an absolutely brilliant experience.
Yeah.
Then you're going, and then the next time it's the bracelet, and the next time it's whatever. And you just, not necessarily raising cost, but making sure you're getting better value. Because the thing is, when you're getting to those volumes, you can call those Chinese manufacturers and say, I'm building more. I need tighter specs. I don't want the standard product. I want this teeny tiny change, because this will make it better.
Yeah. And taking care of those 3 people who are disgruntled can make or break your company.
I agree.
How you deal with adversity, how you deal with a problem can launch you. I give you, this is a stupid example, and we're not at the end of the show, so I'm just going to say it anyways. I worked at an outside cold storage facility. I was the customer service director there, and we had a big meat supplier in Canada that we did not have as a customer
Mm.
reach out to us over a holiday weekend saying they're trying to deliver to Costco and Costco's refusing the delivery. We need to sit on the product until the following Tuesday because Monday was off. So I said, can we bring it to your facility? You hold it and we'll pay you to make the delivery, right?
Yeah.
So company came, we said, yes, we'll do that for you. We took the product into storage, and the guy on the forklift, instead of putting it in the cooler at cooler temperature for meat, he put it in the freezer. So come Tuesday, this fresh pork tenderloin is no longer worth as much as it was worth before because it's rock solid.
Yes.
And of course, now we had nothing to deliver to Costco. So as a customer service, trying to make up for the mistake, we had product flown from Winnipeg to the Costco stores directly instead of bringing it to the distribution center to make up for the problem. That cost us a small fortune, but you know what? It landed us the customer afterwards.
Yeah, that's what you need to.
So you have to go above and beyond when there's a problem. How you deal with it, it means everything to the customers. And then that reputation afterwards as problem solvers, as people who want to work with their customers, and you care about the after sales, not just about the sale. That's huge, immensely.
Yeah, agree.
Wow. On that note, thanks so much for your honesty here this morning, Mike. Not that we expected anything less today from you, but also thanks for your generous offering of time, because I can see by the clock on the wall that we're almost at the 2-hour mark here. So thanks so much for that. And you know what? Thanks to everyone out there who's listening. The Time to Calibrate podcast is released every 2 weeks and can be found wherever you listen to podcasts. If you would like to contact us, we are at Time to Calibrate on Instagram, and you can always email us at timetocalibrate@gmail.com. We'll see you here on the next one. T2C out.